What if the world you perceive, your memories, emotions, even your sense of time, is not a reflection of objective reality, but a field constructed around a single point of energetic coherence? A point so pivotal that even the slightest displacement can alter your experience of life entirely. This axis of perception, long known to mystics and recently echoed in frontier science, is called the assemblage point. It is a dynamic locus in the human energy field, a spatial coordinate of the self where electromagnetic, scalar, and neurological processes converge to generate the illusion we call reality. The term assemblage point entered contemporary awareness through the teachings of Carlos Castaneda, whose apprenticeship with Yaqui sorcerer Don Juan opened a gateway into a radically different vision of human perception. According to Don Juan, each person is enveloped by a luminous cocoon, a field of awareness that surrounds the body, and within this field, there is a specific location where perception is assembled. This point, luminous to those with the eyes to see it, floats within the cocoon like a star in space. Its position determines the world we perceive. When it is fixed in its habitual location, we see the world of ordinary reality, the physical, the expected, the explainable. But when it shifts, other realities become accessible. Entire worlds, dormant, parallel, sometimes dreamlike, or utterly incomprehensible, come into view. To shift the assemblage point Don Juan taught was to reclaim our birthright as seers, to perceive directly the infinite bands of awareness available to human consciousness. This act was energetic. A movement of the assemblage point was a movement of being, a reorientation of the soul's lens. Such teachings, once dismissed by Western rationalism, are increasingly echoed in fields of study that explore the holographic nature of consciousness.
The assemblage point is an area this big on your energy body. And from that viewpoint, you see a whole different worldview. If you shift that assemblage point a little bit, your view changes. So you shift it this much, you can go from feeling terrible to feeling joyous. If you shift it maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches, you start seeing other realms. So in shamanic practice, we want to keep that fluid. We want to keep the assemblage point fluid so we can see different viewpoints. Normally, we're stuck on one viewpoint. For most people, it's the rational, logical way of looking at things. And that's so limited. So if you want to have really wonderful experiences shamanically and superordinary powers and all that, you must shift your assemblage point.
For the Toltec seers, the assemblage point was the cornerstone of true power. According to Don Juan, to access the assemblage point, one had to first quiet the internal dialogue. The constant narrative of the mind, he said, acts like an anchor, fixing the assemblage point in its ordinary location. Only when thought is silenced, through discipline, intent, or shock, can the point begin to loosen, to drift, and eventually to move. Dreaming was one such practice. In heightened states of lucid dreaming, warriors could observe the position of their assemblage point and deliberately shift it, exploring new worlds as real and complex as waking life. Recapitulation, the act of energetically reclaiming one's life force from past events, was another method, freeing trapped energy and increasing mobility.
The assemblage point is a beautiful construct where there's a point, they have this point where everything assembles. You could almost call it the identity. Mm-hmm. You know, it's how you see the world. You know, I'm a logical man. I'm a rational man. If I got to see the numbers, I got to see the proof. But if you bump that assemblage point, then there's a whole new segment of the frequencies is available to you. And so now you can see things like empathy, and see things like love, and see things like beauty or poetry. And if you bump it again, the assemblage point, then you're open to, say, even spirituality, or philosophical questions. Who knows, And so the notion that you can move that assemblage point around is like a really nice way of visualizing it.
Don Juan described the assemblage point as a fluid intelligence, sensitive to discipline, heightened awareness, and impeccable intent. Strengthening it required a fierce clarity of purpose, a life lived not for comfort, but for alignment. To keep it steady in a new position meant anchoring perception not in habit or identity, but in direct knowledge. When stabilized in expanded positions, the assemblage point opens the gateway to nonlinear time, telepathy, heightened perception, and deep silence. The warrior who masters this becomes a true navigator of reality and a participant in the shaping of it. Evidence suggests that awareness is not confined to the brain, but rather distributed across a complex electromagnetic ecosystem centered in the thoracic region, particularly around the chest and spine. This is where electric, magnetic, and scalar forces converge with the highest intensity. Clive Baxter's experiments in primary perception, HeartMath Institute's findings on heart-brain entrainment, and the emerging field of biophotonics all reveal a distributed architecture of consciousness, capable of coherence, adaptation, and non-local resonance. At the center of this architecture lies a high torsion nexus, located just above the physical heart. It is here many believe that the assemblage point resides, a dynamic interference node where field information is translated into perceptual stability, a sort of energetic aperture through which the self constructs the real. Physiological and energetic disturbances, whether caused by trauma, intense stress, or emotional rupture, can dislodge this focal point. When that happens, the perceptual framework begins to fragment. The world loses vibrancy. Emotional depth recedes. The familiar becomes alien due to an altered electromagnetic assembly, as if the lens through which life is rendered has been knocked off axis. Just as a telescope slightly misaligned produces a skewed image, the displaced assemblage point distorts the narrative of self and the field it inhabits. To understand this more clearly, imagine the assemblage point as the focal setting of a camera. When correctly aligned, light enters and a coherent image is formed. But if that lens is nudged by shock, grief, or trauma, the image becomes distorted. The content of the world doesn't change, but its clarity, contrast, and framing do. The reality you inhabit appears altered because the perceptual lens through which you engage it has shifted. To return to clarity is to realign this point through coherence. Many ancient lineages encoded the existence of this axis into their spiritual and anatomical systems. The Tibetan Bindu, the Kabbalistic Dot, the Vedic Hridaya, and the Egyptian loop of the Ankh all reference a central convergence point where form meets formlessness, breath meets light. When we speak of shifting the assemblage point, we're describing a shift in the interference pattern of the human field, the harmonics by which light, sound, and electrical signals converge into meaning. To change the position of this point is to alter the very syntax of reality. Perception widens, synchronicities increase. The sense of self becomes permeable to something larger, more intelligent, more whole. What was previously dismissed as invisible now comes into focus because the lens has been tuned to receive it. Research into biofield coherence continues to confirm what mystics have intuited for centuries, that coherence precedes clarity. Breath, intention, and awareness have measurable effects on the electromagnetic ordering of the body. When heart rhythms enter into coherent resonance with brainwaves, and when scalar potentials across the chest stabilize, the body's field reorganizes into a toroidal structure. It is in this structure that the assemblage point finds its natural seat, a center not fixed, but harmonized by order, rhythm, and meaning. Displacement, then, is not pathology, it is a loss of resonance. And healing is not the imposition of will, but the invitation of harmonic remembrance. There are practices that return the access to stillness. Breath, when slowed and deepened, entrains the nervous system to a more ordered state. Toning and sonic resonance stimulate the chest cavity, activating the electromagnetic field around the heart. Stillness, silence, and conscious gaze stabilize the reflective interface between the inner and outer worlds. These are the technologies of perception, methods by which the assemblage point, like a compass needle, realigns to magnetic north. All in all, the assemblage point is the sacred axis by which perception becomes reality. It is where your attention becomes matter, where your breath meets the field. To work with it is to become an architect of perception, a steward of coherence, and a traveler of inner terrains once obscured by noise, as you come to realize that you are the fulcrum around which your experience is assembled. So remember, you are the field, you are the mirror, and the power to shift the real has always lived within you.